The desert evening settled over Dry Creek like an old curse. Slow, heavy, and impossible to shake. The sun hung low behind the gallows platform, its fading orange glow stretching long shadows across the cracked earth. Every person in the gathered crowd stood stiff and silent, eyes fixed on the woman forced up the rickety steps. Maria Redbird walked with her chin high, though her wrists were bound so tight that flecks of dried blood stained the rope. She was young, mid-20s at most, with a sharp, striking face shaped by two worlds that neither fully claimed her. The Apache blood from her mother gave her fierce cheekbones and storm-dark eyes. Her father's Mexican lineage softened the edges, giving her a quiet beauty even now, with death waiting above her. The sheriff marched behind her, boots thudding across the boards. "Step up," he barked, though she was already at the top. She didn't flinch at his tone. She'd heard worse from men like him all her life. Maria looked out over the crowd. Some stared with cold judgment. Others stared at the ground, pretending they weren't watching. A few kids clung to their parents' legs, sensing a fear they couldn't name. She had been accused of killing a rancher, a man she had never even spoken to. But Dry Creek didn't need proof. They just needed someone different enough to blame. "I didn't touch that rancher," she said, voice steady, carried by the dry breeze. "You know I didn't." The sheriff avoided her gaze as he tightened the coarse rope around her neck. "Doesn't matter what I know," he muttered. "This town's been restless. They want blood, and you're the easiest to give 'em." Maria's jaw tensed. The noose scraped against her skin, rough as cactus bark. A murmur moved through the crowd like wind through grass, uneasy, conflicted, but unwilling to stop what was coming. Above them, the wood creaked. Beside her, the sheriff reached for the lever. Maria inhaled one last breath of desert air. It tasted like sand, gunpowder, and regret. Her gaze drifted to the horizon, where the sky met the land in a smear of gold. She wondered if her mother would be waiting on the other side. She wondered if dying hurt. The sheriff gripped the lever tight. The crowd held their breath. Maria closed her eyes. And then the world snapped apart. A gunshot cracked through the tension, loud enough to make several people duck. The rope above Maria's head split cleanly, strands snapping like a frayed whip. The severed end tossed in the air before falling limp. Gasps filled the square. Through the drifting dust rode a cowboy. Broad-shouldered, tall, his long coat flaring behind him as he strode toward the platform. His revolver was still warm, smoke curling from the barrel. His hat cast a shadow across a face chiseled by sun, grit, and old scars. Before Maria could fall, he stepped forward and caught her with an arm strong enough to stop her weight mid-drop. He lowered her gently, like something precious he refused to let break. The sheriff sputtered, face going red. "Who the hell do you think you are?" The cowboy holstered his gun with slow precision, then lifted his gaze. Calm, dangerous, unshakable. "She's mine," he said softly. And the entire town felt the chill beneath his words. Maria's breath rasped as her knees touched the dusty ground, the last sting of the rope burning across her throat. Her heartbeat thudded wildly, half from the near-death moment and half from the shock of seeing him, Colt Maddox, standing over her like a ghost stepped out of memory. Colt's hands were gentle as he slipped the remaining rope from her neck. His touch was steady, practiced, the touch of a man who had saved lives before, though never one that mattered to him quite like this. The crowd kept their distance, murmuring anxiously as the heat of the desert thickened the air. "Breathe slow," Colt murmured. Maria blinked, vision steadying. She studied him with disbelief. His jaw was rough with 3 days of stubble, his coat dusty from travel, and the familiar, quiet intensity behind his eyes hit her like a blow. "You shouldn't have come back here," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, every word scraping like sandpaper. Colt brushed his thumb across the angry red mark circling her neck. The tenderness in that small gesture hurt more than the rope ever had. "Wasn't about the town," he said. "It was about you." Maria swallowed against the ache. "Colt, they'll kill you for this." Colt's mouth curved in a humorless half-smile. "They're welcome to try." Behind them, the sheriff barked orders, snapping the crowd out of their frozen shock. "Get your rifles up." He shot the rope. Next shot goes through him. Several men raised their rifles, hands trembling either from fear or anger. Dust spiraled around their boots as they spread out, forming a semicircle. Colt rose slowly, placing himself squarely in front of Maria. He didn't draw his gun this time, not yet. He stood with an unhurried confidence that rattled the men aiming at him. "You shoot," Colt said calmly, "and the first bullet that hits her is on your conscience." "She's a criminal," one man shouted back. "No," Colt corrected, voice low but cutting through the noise, "she's a scapegoat. You all know that Rancher had enemies and debts. But you'd rather hang someone who can't fight the law." The crowd murmured again. Some looked down. Others shifted uneasily. The sheriff tightened his jaw, but even he seemed unsure. Maria pushed herself to her feet behind Colt, unsteady but determined. "You don't have to defend me," she whispered. Colt glanced sideways at her, eyes softening. "I'm not defending you," he said. "I'm claiming you." Her heart stumbled in her chest. 3 years ago, he had left without explanation. Just a note, a promise, and silence. She'd spent those years telling herself she didn't care if she ever saw him again. Yet one whisper from him now, and the past roared back like wildfire. The sheriff lifted his rifle higher. "Get away from her, Maddox. She faces justice." Colt's jaw tightened. "You call that justice?" He swept his gaze over the crowd. A rushed hanging with no trial. No evidence. No defense. A few of the townspeople stepped back, ashamed. They hadn't expected a fight, only a spectacle. Colt reached for Maria's hand. His grip was firm, grounding. "We're leaving," he said to her. "Right now." Gunfire exploded behind them. "Go." Colt pulled her with him as bullets kicked up bursts of sand at their feet. The crowd scattered in panic as Maria and Colt sprinted toward the open desert beyond the gallows. The wind whipped against their faces as they ran past abandoned shacks and the dry creek bed that gave the town its name. Maria's lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed her forward. Colt kept her close, shielding her from stray fire with his body. When they finally reached the first stretch of open plains, Colt slowed, keeping his arm around her waist to steady her. "You trust me?" he asked, chest rising and falling with hard breaths. Maria looked up at him, at the man who had once broken her heart, and just saved her life. "I always did," she said softly. The shouts of the posse grew faint behind them as they crossed into the glowing horizon. Together they disappeared into the vast, burning gold of the desert, two souls running from the law, from the past, and toward a future neither of them could yet name. Behind them, Dry Creek would talk for years about the day the hanged Apache woman didn't die, because a lone cowboy cut her down and claimed her with the kind of devotion that terrified the men who feared anything they couldn't control.